What's up, good people? Mark Holmes here, and as always, I want to thank you all for watching, commenting, subscribing, and being part of the Joe Boo Sports Report. Without you guys, as well as you ladies, you know that this literally, and I mean literally, does not work. I hope everybody's having a great, finally, freaking Friday. I'm happy because I can get back home. Um, there's always work to do, and unfortunately, I have to do it on the road. But you know what? I'm just thankful that I have work to do. But we are getting closer and closer, and I mean closer and closer to training camp. Today is already the 8th. We are 1 week away from the Dallas Cowboys needing to have Dalton Schultz's deal done, or else he'll be playing on the franchise tag. And is there any mystery players that the Dallas Cowboys would be adding? We still have $22.4 million of cap space and more room that could be created if we do get Dalton Schultz's deal done by the 15th. But we know the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys with Catboy don't look to spend any money. Just don't. Stephen Jones famously, when they signed Deion Sanders, threw his daddy against the wall because he didn't want him to spend his inheritance. That's the kind of guy we deal with. But it is what it is. We have to at least hope that the Cowboys had a great foundation from last year. And I dare say, when I look back at last year, where we were compared to where we are now, there were people that doubted the Dallas Cowboys last year, didn't think that the Cowboys were that great, thought that the Washington Commanders, away, were the better team in the division and better suited to win the division. They put a lot of stake in Ryan Fitzpatrick, thinking that Ryan Fitzpatrick would not be Ryan Fitztragic, but ended up being Ryan Fitztragic, as we all know. And the Dallas Cowboys, with the best quarterback in the division, won the division. Let's be clear. Quarterbacks are the be-all, end-all. And if you've got a good one, you've got a pretty good chance of winning the division. Now, we've all heard that the Eagles have the best roster, or one of the best rosters in football, and yada, yada, yada. Although, yesterday I saw another ranking where they had the Cowboys as like the 6th best, and I think the Eagles as the 8th best. The reality is nobody knows. Football is determined sometimes beyond just the talent on the field. Sometimes it's breaks. Sometimes the better team will lose because the officials made a couple of bad calls. Or the football bounced the wrong way away from you and into the other team's hand, and they get an easy score. And then all of a sudden momentum changes. It's always funny how they rank all of these teams, and yet in the end, a team that they ranked 28th in the NFL goes to the Super Bowl in the Cincinnati Bengals. And now, of course, everybody's on the Cincinnati Bengals bandwagon. It wouldn't surprise me if they had a losing season. Just wouldn't, because that's football. In the meantime, as we sit here in speculation time, the speculation will be is camp battles. Where we sat last year, we looked at the defensive line and we said, well, Tristan Hill, Tristan Hill and Neville Gallimore. If we can get a bit out of those guys, we're in good shape. That those guys are going to be our starters, because we had tried the year before all of the veterans, the Gerald McCoys, the Emerson Griffins, the Don Terry Poes, the over-the-hill guys. We ended up signing a lot of free agents in 2020, thinking that was going to be the way. And I think that's part of the reason that the Cowboys soured on a lot of the bigger name free agents. Now, I'm not going to say that Emerson Griffin and those guys were big names, but they were a lot bigger than what we signed now. I mean, they're not the Von Millers, but they're a tier higher than what we normally would sign, be it past their prime. And unfortunately, their age showed on all of them. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Cowboys would rather go with those lower guys and figure the incentive is for those guys to perform because they want to get that contract. You could look at a Ron Kurtz, who came in because he was making under $1 million, and he played lights out for you because he's trying to get a name established for the Cowboys or elsewhere. And so having a person in a contract year trying to perform sometimes they perform a lot better than a guy who knows I've been paid. As Doc Walker would always say, it's hard to be hungry when your refrigerator's full. And there's a lot of truth to that. So what a difference a year makes. The Cowboys invested on the defensive line. And they're looking at it, they're a lot better than where they were before. Because Carlos Watkins, one of those lower tier guys that we signed, was penciled in actually as a starter. He got a second deal with the Cowboys, brought back. Neville Gallimore, the Canadian bulldozer who missed most of the season with the hyperextended elbow, is penciled in to be the other starting defensive lineman. And when they go into the other defense with 3 down linemen, you got guys now like John Ridgeway that they're very, very high on, and Quinton Bohannon. So that leaves Tristan Hill, who for the most part has had a flash here and a flash there, but has not been the guy that you look at and say, oh yeah, he's outstanding. His first year kind of had problems with Rod Marnelli, never really got on the field much. His second year, he started playing well, but then tore his ACL. And then getting into last year, again, was late getting started because of the ACL and coming back on there. And a lot of people will say that he is on the bubble. This is his, contract year, that if he doesn't perform, he's gone. Right now, he is penciled in to be behind Neville Gallimore. Now, one thing I will say, because here's actually the depth chart on the defensive line. The Cowboys actually have more depth on the defensive line with guys that you can look at and say, yeah, they can actually play. And guys that are actually positions where you look at and say, yeah, that guy is a defensive tackle. That guy is actually a nose tackle. Whereas the Cowboys used to have guys like Tyrone Crawford, who was a little bit big to be a defensive end, but not really big enough to be a tackle. He was kind of a tweener, and we always said he does the dirty work. Yeah, but when you're a jack of all trades, you're not a master of none. He wasn't a great defensive end, and he wasn't a great tackle. And sometimes when you need a defensive tackle, you go get yourself a defensive tackle. And the same thing about nose tackle, or nose guard, as when I played, which meant you just lined up over the center, or you shaded a little to the left, you shaded a little to the right. But basically, you were the man in the middle as a nose guard. Usually, they're not a defensive tackle. They are a nose guard, which means they're usually a little bit shorter and a little bit fatter, because you are getting hit and you are the point of attack and have to be moved out of there. And when you have guys that are kind of tall or kind of lean, they're not great defensive tackles. And this is where the Cowboys have finally gone out and got themselves some. Because last year they ended up, be it late in the draft, Quinton Bohannon, who is another man who may be on the bubble because of John Ridgeway, is another big body that you want to put in the middle to be an immovable force. But we actually have guys that are truly defensive tackles. So you have Carlos Watkins, who will probably be the starter. And then you have Osa. Now, Osa is a little bit light, but he is so quick and so good with his hands. He is a great, and I think will be a great defensive tackle. Then behind him, you have Quinton Bohannon, and then Austin Faberu is the 4th string. Now, we start talking about the right defensive tackle. You've got, of course, Neville Gallimore sitting there. Behind him right now is Tristan Hill, and then John Ridgeway. If John Ridgeway really shows up, and then Josh Brunson would be the 4th down, I'm not sure that the Cowboys will keep 8 defensive linemen. Maybe they will. They might. They may look at it and say, well, you know what? We're on the last year of Tristan Hill's deal. He's playing for a contract. Maybe the incentive is on for him. But right now, he's penciled in to be the 2nd defensive tackle. If John Ridgeway really shows up and shows well at training camp, and Tristan Hill is just average, I could see that being a possibility of Tristan Hill being cut. But I actually don't think that he is. I think that this is one of those guys that they will hold on to and give a chance, because he's still only about $1 million on his contract. He's dirt cheap. Now, that's not to say that they'll re-sign him after this year, but when we look back at injuries, remember, he was coming back from an ACL. And typically, an ACL is one of those things, yeah, you're playing, but you're not playing necessarily at that elite level or playing fully. It really takes you a year from those major injuries to actually get back to where you hope to be and fully a go. And that's why I think the Cowboys will actually hold on to him unless he is just straight up garbage in training camp. He's going to have to be straight up garbage for the Cowboys to let him go. All right, so good people, I got some work to do this morning, of course, before I hit the road. I'm going to try and get on the road earlier today. I'm supposed to get some severe thunderstorms and stuff, and I really don't want to get caught in them. And I'll be happy because I'll be back at the man cave. Sometime this weekend, me and DMV are going to get together for a little round table, or maybe a square table. Why got to be round? It could be a square table. But we're going to, or it might even be on the outside if it's not raining too much. In the outside studio, the weather's nice, just discussing the Dallas Cowboys and maybe even doing the chip challenge. Maybe even doing the chip challenge. And we'll probably have some wings too. Gotta have, you know what? Get together, have some wings. Ain't nothing wrong with some wings. But with that being said, you know how we roll. I got work to do and I appreciate you. And let's face it, there's not a whole lot going on. But there's one thing that I can't wait for. I can't wait to get back to the man cave so I can see the countdown clock. Nice thing about being gone for a few days, it's all of a sudden like it just jumps. It just jumps down. It's like, oh, it's so nice. Whereas when you're there, it's kind of like a watch pot. A watch pot never boils. And a watch clock, you sit there watching the clock. Come on, football season, come on. So you go away. You come back. It actually looks good. Hope you guys have a great Friday. Be safe out there, and I'll see you soon.